Montgomery County Police Department. Then he was director of school safety, school department. And recently they created a Maryland Center for School Safety, and he's now the executive director of that new organization. So let me turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Tony. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We're coming out, especially on March Madness. How's everybody's brackets doing? Okay. Maybe that's why you're here tonight. Okay. I think it's a very important night for us as community of Montgomery County residents, so we can hear from our candidates who are running for county executive. What I'd like to do is just go over briefly what the ground rules will be, and then we'll get started here. Tony's asked that we have a format that I will give a short bio of all four of our candidates for county executive. The first question will start out with a 2-minute opportunity. We'll go down this way initially, and then we'll go in reverse order. Then there will be a series of questions that will either be posed from the audience, or Tony's had the opportunity for members of our community to email him with questions. So on those questions, I will be pretty much reading verbatim. So please don't hold that against me, and we're very excited about that. So if we start off first with Mr. Phil Andrews, just give a little brief background. Mr. Andrews, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, holds a master's degree in governmental administration. Mr. Andrews was the president of the Montgomery County Council in 2009, and has served a number of years on the council, including chair of the Public Safety Committee. Welcome, Mr. Andrews. Next, we have Mr. Doug Duncan. Mr. Duncan was our county executive from 1994 to 2006. He previously served 3 terms as the mayor of Rockville. He grew up in Montgomery County and is a graduate of Columbia University. Welcome, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Leggett, our current county executive. He's been our executive for 2 terms, from 2006 until 2014. He served 4 terms as an at-large member of the Montgomery County Council from 1986 to 2002. He's also served as the council president 3 times. In 1977, he was a White House Fellow and was a captain in the United States Army. He grew up in very poor circumstances in the state of Louisiana. He was an assistant dean of law at Howard University. Welcome, Mr. Leggett. And last is Mr. Jim Shalik. Mr. Shalik, these first 3 candidates are representing the Democratic Party. Mr. Shalik is the Republican candidate for county executive. Mr. Shalik was an assistant district attorney in Bronx, New York. Was also an assistant attorney general for New York State, as well as a attorney in the U.S. Department of Justice. When he was assigned in Bronx, New York, he was the prosecutor of the son of Sam Killer, who was involved in 3 murders. Mr. Shalik has been a Montgomery County resident for 25 years, and he currently practices private law in Montgomery County. Welcome, Mr. Shalik. And gentlemen, we'll have our official timekeeper there, so she will sort of give you an indication. We're looking for a very productive and robust discussion here tonight, because these are very important issues to our community in terms of criminal justice. Some of the questions may not be directly related to criminal justice, but I think there is a nexus to criminal justice within Montgomery County here. Our first question, and we'll start with you, Mr. Andrews, is what is your assessment of crime in Montgomery County? And what initiatives are you proposing to counter crime?
Well, thank you. I'm going to stand to be able to project to the back of the room here. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks to Safe Silver Spring for sponsoring this forum. I have served as chair of the council's Public Safety Committee now for 14 years. As chair of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council for the county, chair of the region's Emergency Preparedness Council. So I do bring a lot of experience to this position. And I would say that we are making progress in reducing crime. We have seen reductions, for example, in crime throughout much of the county. There are some hot spots that we still have, and we are targeting those with our police community action team and with assignment of officers who are specialized and able to beef up areas where there needs to be more assistance. For example, back in 2011, the council approved adding 16 police officers to the Silver Spring Central Business District in order to address crime in the Silver Spring Central Business District area. which was a good approach to address it. I would say that that has been effective, and we've seen a reduction in most crimes, not only in the Silver Spring area, but throughout the county. And indeed, we're seeing it across the country. Rates are far lower than they used to be, and so there is a historical trend there as well. Crime peaked with the crack epidemic. It's been going down since then. But there are things that we need to do to make sure we're smart. And I want to draw a contrast with the current county executive on one issue that I thought was a very poor proposal, and that was the proposed youth curfew back in 2011. There was a gang fight in Silver Spring, you recall, that summer, and Mr. Leggett, in response to that, proposed a permanent countywide youth curfew. I asked the hard questions about that, and when they weren't convincing answers, I led the effort to defeat it. It made no sense to me to have a permanent countywide youth curfew in response to that incident, and I think time is right. So thank you for being here.
Great. Ed, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Sorry, I apologize. Didn't mean to step on his applause line. I apologize for that. Good evening. It's great to be with you. You know, we live in a great community, and we're very fortunate in a lot of different ways. And I think Montgomery County generally has had low crime for quite some time now. We've seen it decrease recently, but we've seen it sort of decrease over time, and I think that it's something that we all should be proud of because the whole community helps to make this happen. I remember when I was county executive, Chief Moose came to me and said, you know, we have about as many people dying from pedestrian accidents as we do from murders in the county every year. And we need to start a pedestrian safety program to help eliminate these needless deaths. So we did that. It's been continued. I think it's a great thing. We still have work to do there. But again, Montgomery County has been very progressive in terms of using its police force and working with the state attorney's office to help fight crime in this county. The one area that I would like to see us invest more in and pay more attention to is our school resource officers. When I was county executive, we had officers assigned to every high school in the county. We have pulled back from that, and I think it's a very, very important issue for us. We've seen some of the tragedies around the country of people coming into schools and just horrible, horrible incidents. And I think our school resource officers can make a difference there. They can get information to help prevent attacks, God forbid. And I'd like to see us get back to having a school resource officer for every high school cluster, and then perhaps looking at the middle schools as well. And as a way to gather information to work with the communities to help prevent, things from happening. Thank you very much.
Go back and look over the last few years in Montgomery County, and you look at the decisions that I've made as county executive. You think about it. In the midst of the recession, when there are huge demands for a number of things that the community wanted, all very good. I stepped forward with a very bold plan 3 years ago and said that we will increase the police force by 143 additional officers and civilian personnel. That was a huge investment in Montgomery County. That investment, in part, has helped us today reduce the rate of crime in Montgomery County to 3 times below the national average. 3 times below the national average. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because we have the resources available. It happened because we were much more creative. And it happened because we have the technology to assist us to move forward in that area. But we did not stop there. I decided that we were going to enhance significantly and pull together many resources to have a positive youth initiative. If you look at the amounts of monies that we provided in the budget of the last few years, today it is about $68 million that is going into efforts to help youth in this community so that they would not be engaged in crime. We talk about pedestrian safety. Look at the amount of monies that we provided in pedestrian safety over the last few years as compared to the years before. All around, this is a holistic approach with youth, with families, with pedestrians, and most importantly, adding officers to the street, and you can see that based on the record. Thank you.
In terms of public safety, I say the same thing to every group, whether it's teachers or the Renters Alliance. My first priority is public safety. It's fair to say that this is basically a safe county. When I was chief of homicide in the Bronx, it's the same population as Montgomery County, about 1 million people. We had 435 murders a year in the Bronx when I was chief of homicide. Montgomery County has maybe 18 or 19 homicides. One is too many. So this is basically a safe community. However, the world has changed. And I say this at every forum. I never want to see a CNN helicopter over any of our schools. The world has changed. We are the bedroom to Washington, D.C. I want to go further than what Doug says. I want to see a uniformed police presence and a marked cruiser outside of every one of our schools. Not just the high schools, every school, to protect our students and our teachers and our staff. Certainly, if there's a rape 2 blocks away, the cop is not going to be riveted to that spot. But we need a police presence at all our schools. I thought this would be too militaristic for Montgomery County. No, it's getting a great reception. We need that. Secondly, I think these trailers we have to go. It's a disgrace that about 10,000 of our students are taught in wooden boxes, trailers. They're unsafe, they have no bathrooms, the climate control is not good. There are disasters waiting to happen, especially some nut with a gun. They're isolated units. So my first priority is safety of our children. That's got to be number one. I know that the county executive's budget just added 23 police officers. I've been urging 50 more officers. I'm from the old school. When you see a cop, that's a deterrent. I think we have to beef up our police department. Public safety is my priority and always will be. Thank you.
Next question, and we'll start with Mrs. Shelley and work our way back. African Americans have a much higher percentage in the criminal justice system than other groups. And the percentage African Americans have a much higher percentage in the criminal justice system than other groups, and the percentage increases the further into the system, the criminal justice system we go. What steps can the county take to address this issue? And on a side note, we're seeing the same trend in public education in the state of Maryland. We're seeing disparate data involving young minority children in terms of suspension and expulsion. So just as a side, Mr. Shelley.
These questions have 1 minute each.
Yeah, that situation is terrible. There's no excuse for that. I mean, the key to that and all the other issues that you raise is education. I mean, education is the key to getting people at the lowest levels up. And the weakest link has to be raised up, and that's good for all of us. I think diversity on the police force is very important. I think we need more Hispanics, more multilingual police officers, firefighters, first responders. I think our communities have to see that they have the same faces as law enforcement. I think that's a crucial component to going into the neighborhoods, to get witnesses, to get participation. A lot of the minority communities, especially the Hispanic communities, there's a disconnect with the law enforcement. That has to end. I think we need more diversity in our police and fire, and I think that will help communities develop a relationship that will strengthen them in terms of law enforcement.
Dealing with the issue at the point of the police is not, it will not solve the problem. It starts much earlier than that. It starts in an educational system. It starts with trying to provide the support that the families and the people in the communities need. It starts with working with youth, and this is why we've invested so much in positive youth initiatives. This is why we've invested so much in our educational system. We cannot rely solely upon the police in order to resolve this problem. We need to invest more in our community organizations. They do a wonderful job in the community, helping us to resolve many of these problems before they become problems and challenges for our community. So we have to rely solely on the police, even though we've invested a great deal on the police sector. It is not the challenge of all. It's the sports academy that we started, Excel Beyond the Veil, the Kennedy Cluster, all of those initiatives, you go right through that budget and you see all the things that we've done in order to provide this holistic approach so that they would not get into the system to begin with and we would not have to rely solely upon the police.
There is a real problem with suspensions and expulsions in our school system. I know the State Board of Education is looking at it, Montgomery County Board of Education is looking at it. They're changing policies. to help alleviate some of those issues there. So I think that's being addressed as we speak. Mr. Leggett, Mr. Shallett talked about our educational system, about sort of prevention kinds of things, of keeping people out of the system. That's all very good, and clearly we need to do that. I want to just talk very briefly about, at the other end, we have a Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in this county that has a tremendous reputation across the country for not just keeping people in jail, but helping rehabilitate them, getting them jobs, getting them employed as they exit, which prevents them from coming back as recidivists into the system. And I think that's another area that we need to make sure that we continue to support and fund and lead the nation in. Thank you.
There are several things we need to do. This is a very complex issue. One of the things we need to do is to make sure that our educational system is meeting the needs of more of our students. For those students who are not going on to college and who need a trade or who need an internship or an apprenticeship, we've got to provide more of those in our public school system. That will help. Second, we need to make sure we continue to support the very progressive policies that our jail has, which is one of the very best in the country in providing training, as Mr. Duncan mentioned, and working to rehabilitate. It's called the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation for a reason, and they really do a great job. And third, we are seeing changes at the state level which are helping, such as no longer locking people up for possession of small amounts of marijuana, treating it as a citation. That helps a lot too, because there are a lot of people that have been in jail that shouldn't have been in jail, and it's a waste of resources, and it hurts people getting jobs in the future.
Our next question is, what can we do as a county and community to reduce the incidence of truancy amongst our school-age standards?
Well, we have a initiative that State Attorney John McCarthy has championed, that is to reach out to have a policy that will reinforce severe truancy. But I think the ultimate solution is you've got to make the educational services that we offer to students more appealing to more students, because there's a reason why you have truancy. You can't force people to learn. You can, to some degree, force people to go to school, but you also have to attract people to something that they're interested in doing. And so ultimately, we have to provide programs in our schools that are appealing to all of our students and they're meeting their needs. That will help reduce truancy. And then you do have to hold parents accountable when you have severe truancy. And that is what that program is meant to do. We had some pilot initiatives with it at a few of the middle schools. John McCarthy's been a great advocate for it. We've supported it on the county council, and that can help too.
Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, there are a number of things that we need to do. Parents need to be held accountable, as Mr. Andrews said. We need to use our school security officers, use our principals, use our teachers to help identify sort of severe truants and try to work with the families. We need to create more after-school programs. We need to find, as Mr. Andrews said, find ways to make the educational experience better for these students who are dropping out or not showing up for school. And I think that clearly, you know, one of the great things about Montgomery County is that we have a world-class school system here. That you can get the best education in the world if you apply yourself in any school in the county. We need to be able to continue to say that, and we need to be able to reach those kids who really aren't experiencing that and show them, here's the benefits of staying in school, here's the benefits of achieving your diploma and then moving on from there. Thank you.
Last year, I had an opportunity to teach for a day in Waterland Middle School. There is a direct correlation between challenges of poverty, people having difficulties at home, and those who are not attending school regularly, those who are transferring from one school to the other. It is one thing to have exciting programs in school, but that's not why students are not coming. For the most part, they're coming because there's disruptions in their home. They do not have the kind of home environment. They do not have the employment that helps the family to nurture the family. That's where you start to address the challenges of truancy. Because if you look at the correlation between the poor students and those who are not attending school regularly, you will see a direct correlation. You have to address that problem at that end. It's not going to be addressed solely at the other end by enforcement, by providing the resources and the help to make certain that people do not get in those situations so that we're not in school again.
It's hard to disagree with any of this. I mean, you know, the key issue is the kids want to go to school, they're going to go to school, they're going to have fun, they're going to enjoy it. That's obviously important. But parent accountability is the key. I mean, if there's a pattern in a family, certainly social workers, there should be an outreach to try and resolve family issues, try and do it in a social setting. But if there comes a point where you have constant truancy, then parents have to be held accountable. And in a lot of jurisdictions, they have truancy courts where they bring the parents in and they go in front of a judge. I mean, nobody's going to go to jail, but they go in front of a judge and there's a truancy court, and that wakes people up. So at some point, you got to get tough on the parents that have a constant pattern watching their kids not go to school.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Shelley. What steps need to be taken to reduce domestic violence in our county?
Well, first of all, domestic violence has to be treated more seriously. I think the trend is getting there, but you know, I'm in court almost every day, and unfortunately, I don't think the judges take it that serious. I think there has to be more input from the judiciary that when a wife beater comes in or there's an abuser in court, they got to have the book thrown at them. Too many times, it's like, let's just stay away, and they're not treated as they should be, which are criminals and thugs. And I think when you treat a domestic violence case as an assault case, as a violent offender, that wakes people up, and deterrence is the key. This is where everybody got to get tough. The social interaction is important, but at some point, you got to throw these guys in jail, period.
Thank you. Mr. Lake?
When the late Maryland prisoner and Duncan suggested to me some years ago that we needed to invest and to ensure that we provided a family justice claim, I immediately responded with, I think, about $500,000 so that the county would be actively engaged in the process. Clearly, there are some challenges with it, but the challenges must be met by clearly enforcement, education, and to make certain that our entire community understands and support the efforts of trying to rid our community of domestic abuse. It is a community-wide problem, and the community needs to enhance itself, embrace itself, so that we not only punish people, but we say that this is not something that is tolerated within our community. We have a first-class criminal justice center, family justice center, and we do great enforcement, but we need to do a better job in education.
Domestic violence it's a horrible, horrible crime. Just a horrible crime. And the women and children who are abused, it just breaks your heart to hear their stories, to meet with them and talk with them. You know, we had a domestic violence task force that made a lot of recommendations for increased enforcement, for providing basically a secret place in the county that we could house victims of domestic violence to separate them from their abuser. And we did a big training thing with our police department. Too many times, our police officers would come into a situation and just try to, you know, it's a family quarrel, try to calm it down instead of taking more aggressive action and really enforcing the law. And that has worked and has worked well. We need to make sure that we keep our police trained and informed on the changes in laws as it relates to domestic violence so that we keep people safe in this community. Thank you.
The county has done a lot in this area, and we've made progress. I've chaired the county's Domestic Violence Coordinating Council until recently, and there's a lot of work being done. Some other things that we need to do, though, are these. We need to respond to the recommendations that the Court Watch has made, which have been comments and observations about some of the practices of the judiciary. For example, making sure that domestic violence victims don't have to enter the court and leave the court at the same time that domestic violence perpetrators have to. So that's one. Second, we need to make sure that we break the cycle of domestic violence through educational efforts. Choose Respect is a program that works in the middle schools and high schools to work to educate young people about the importance of avoiding abusive relationships. And that's what we ultimately have to do, is to break the cycle. And third, we need to work at the state level to get legislation through, which is moving this year, which will more appropriately treat domestic violence cases.
Thank you. Our next question is, do we need more youth programs in this county? If so, what kind of programs do we need for our youth?
Well, the prime time for juvenile crime is after school. So That's the time where it's most important to provide additional youth programs, and it makes sense to provide as many of those at school as possible because it minimizes the need for transportation, which is a barrier for a lot of young people. So we need to make sure that we have appealing and adequately programmed after-school programs, especially in areas where a lot of students don't have other options. That's probably the thing that we can do the most. And we do have a number of those programs. We've been ramping them back up after the recession. Some of them were cut during that time. But that is something that is a proven strategy and something that we need to continue to develop so that our young people don't get in trouble and get off track and end up in trouble.
Yeah, after-school programs, the level of poverty in this county has increased quite a bit over the last several years, and it puts real strain on our schools in terms of the kinds of students coming into the schools from very poor backgrounds. And what we see happen is the parents are trying to, particularly in the Latino communities, the parents are trying to hold a job or two or three to pay their bills. The children are back from school, no parental supervision, really nothing to do, and that's where the gang influence starts to come in. And we've seen that too many times where the gang sort of becomes the new family for these children. So that's why we're looking at a lot of prevention programs, as the three gentlemen behind me have talked about, of ways to give kids activities, to do things with our youth so that they're not sort of seduced into the gangs and then become a much bigger problem for us. Thank you.
I hope that at some point in time you have an opportunity to look at the list of the programs that I've provided for you over the last few years. Right now, we're looking at $68 billion. And just compare that to any point in time in our history. We have programs that sell beyond the bell. We have sports academies. We have beefed up that considerably. In fact, I was given a national award by the American Youth Council, big Wheaties box in my office, with my picture on it, recognizing me in Montgomery County for the things that we've done as a model in the nation, what other communities should in fact be doing. But that's not enough, because if there are youth here who are still engaged in crime as one crime committed, we need to redouble those efforts. We have the resources, we have the technology available, we have all of the things in place. We simply need to continue this march forward. And you'll see that gang-related violence we talked about go down even further than we have today.
Okay, this is probably not an answer for this group, but I can't understand why school starts at like 6:30 in the morning. And by 2 o'clock, everybody's home. I never understood why at 2 o'clock, the day's over. But I agree with what's been said. Kids have too much time on their hands. You need programs to keep them busy, after-school programs, after schools. We all agree with that. But I don't understand why the day is so short. You give them a longer day, they're going to be tired, they're going to be busy, they're not going to be roaming around with nothing to do. But that's for another forum. But I agree with everything that's said. You just have to have more programs, which we do in this county, and you just have to fill up their time. Keep them from wandering around.
Thank you. This will be our last question from our pre-identified questions. We'll go to the audience next. If we run out of questions, we have plenty of backup. So we're going to keep things moving here. And we'll start again with you, Mr. Schaller. What is your definition of community policing, and what is your assessment of where we are in this county in the area of community policing?
Well, first of all, we have a fabulous police department. I mean, a world-class police department. And my whole career was in law enforcement until I moved here. So we got a great police department. Community policing is having police assigned to communities. I mean, by definition, they're assigned to communities. They get to know the businesses, the schools, the students. They're assigned to a community, and they develop there. They're not rotated all around, so there's a presence. They get to know the people. They know the officers know them, and it develops a strong working relationship between people in the community and the officer. And I think it's a great idea. We're doing it. You know, the police department's broken up by districts, and I think it works. You know, I want to repeat, this is a safe community. I mean, let's not walk out of here afraid to go to a car. Well, I can tell you about some unsafe places. This is a safe community. What I'm worried about is the trend that we see every night on television. What's ahead of these nuts out there with guns and these terrorist groups. We're the bedroom of Washington, D.C., and the future is such a question mark. That's our concern.
Thank you. Mr. Leggett?
This is a safe community, but we can make it even safer. And we make it safer by having the police work with the community, that they're an integral part of the community, and the community respect the police officers, and there's a two-way street. There's a challenge about community policing in our community today. It is tied to our broken immigration policy. You can't have effective community policing if, in fact, many of the community feel that they are not part of the community or are afraid of the police. This is why you do not have people who speak other languages, people of other cultures who are part of the system as it relates to policing, because they are sometimes too afraid to be engaged. This is why we need to address the immigration policy, because it is directly tied to public safety and community policing. A large segment of our community feels isolated from that, and it's due in part to our immigration policy.
Community policing has been a part of this county and frankly, police departments across the country for quite some time now. And I think Montgomery County has been committed to it for some time and worked very hard to do that. As a matter of fact, our prosecutor, I think Doug Gansler, when he was a state's attorney here, decided to pair community prosecution with community policing so that you'd have the same prosecutors working with the same police officers on cases in particular areas of the county. It's absolutely the right way to go. You want to make sure that you've got time to do that community policing, so you need to make sure you've got the right number of officers. You need to make sure that the beats in the county are equalized in terms of calls for service, so you do have time to meet with people to do that community effort. And the school resource officers are a wonderful way of providing community policing through our school system and through the neighborhoods that those schools serve. Thanks.
Community policing is problem-oriented policing. About 18 years ago, I was running the police department's community assisting police program, which was an AmeriCorps-based program, one of the first public safety police-based AmeriCorps programs in the country, and worked out of the Silver Spring District Station far from here. So it's proactive. It's working in the community. The police department has adjusted to that and responded to that as well by establishing districts that are more evenly divided. So we've had a 6-district station now up in Ypsilanti County now for several years. It is important to have adequately staffed beats, and it's important that the community is engaged with the police. And so the police do an excellent job in this county doing that. Training is a crucial part of that. Our officers are among the best. They get 6 months of full-time training and then in-service training as well. That helps them be able to assist the community in all kinds of ways.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is a great segue. Now we're going to hear from you as the community. If you have a question, we'll call on you. Please allot 30 seconds for your question. Try to frame that question in a very specific way to our candidates. Yes, sir. Thank you for being the first.
Okay, I'm disappointed that they moved the 3rd district out on the other side of the Beltway. I think Silver Spring is growing so much that we need a full-time station down in Silver Spring, somewhere in our neighborhood. What are your comments to that?
Well, the reason that the district station has been moved are a couple, but one is that it's more central in terms of its geography that it covers. There is still a Silver Spring Central Business District satellite station that will be here that will fully serve the central Silver Spring area, and I think that will be sufficient. Police officers generally actually don't work out of stations anyway. They're on the road, they're doing beats, and so what is important in having police service is making sure it's adequately staffed and that they can cover their beats. And we have beefed up the Silver Spring Central Business District area over the last several years. So there is more police services in Silver Spring, in this downtown area of Silver Spring, than there used to be. And that has helped. There's no question that's helped. So I think that's the key issue.
Yeah, I started the satellite stations in the county. I think they're a wonderful way to increase police presence, to increase police visibility throughout the county. But what you have to realize is with technology today, they're not at the station. They're not at, we created a central booking department, so they're not booking people they've arrested. They're on the beat, patrolling with their computers, with their radios, with their cell phones, with everything they have in terms of getting information and looking for things, doing that community policing. So As long as we're able to do that, I think we're in good shape throughout the entire county. And we've got the police presence to make sure that they're visible and people see them and see that they're out there protecting them.
If a stationary building doesn't move, the cars move, the bicycles, the horses, the computers that are in the cars move. This is where we need to have the presence. I think it's less of an investment in terms of the actual physical structure. This new station is centrally located for the entire district. But I think what most people say to us, they want to see police, they want to see them in their communities, and that's where we've invested. I've invested 143 additional officers in the system, more into Silver Spring than we had before. That's where the investment is. So I don't think that the crucial building in and of itself is that important compared to all the other investments that we make.
The key to effective policing is not so much where the building is, where they start their day, but the reaction. If there's a hot spot in Silver Spring where there's break-ins of cars or burglaries, then officers should be brought from Bethesda, Germantown, wherever they're needed. So you got to react to the hot spots. And I think that's the key to policing, effective management of moving people around, like our military today. Get them to the hot spots to react. So where they start their day is not important. It's where they end up to treat a hotspot issue.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about the parking in this area, especially at the corner of Pine Ridge and Barron. And there are signs there that have been there for 54 years that I lived out here. And there are no parking signs. But people park there all the time. And if I call the police to say, to report it, they said they have better things, they have other things to do. The same goes with, now, decibel laws. When I first moved out here, there were decibel laws. But now it seems that people can play their radio or phonograph as loud as they want to, anytime they want to. And it's very annoying. At my age, I got to get a little bit of rest. And when I call the police and they tell me that they don't have any decibel laws, I wonder when did they cease having them, because they used to have them.
Can I sort of take frame that as a question? Can I frame that as a question?
Yeah.
Based on what this gentleman said, how can we be more effective in enforcing parking violation laws as well as quality of life issues? And also, this sort of ties back to policing, the accountability back to this gentleman who is a citizen to have an appropriate response in terms of problem solving. And I think, Mr. Schauer, you're up, and then is that where we're at? Mr. Schauer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a function of effective policing. When there's an issue that this gentleman has, the local police commander should react, send officers out, target the area, give out citations to people that are violating these nuisance laws. If you have zero tolerance to this, the offenders will go away. So it's enforcement. This is a police issue, and they have to enforce it with citations and remove the problem. It's that simple.
Well, I agree with you, but when I call, they said that they have other things to do. More important.
They say they have other things to do.
That
They will say that they have more important things to do. And getting back to this particular problem, there is no policing in this community. I live on Gilbert Street between Seek Lane and Gilbert Place. The cars can be parked there for several days. No police showed up. The home was broken into. And my feeling is that it's happening because the criminals see that there's no police activity. So there's nobody that's going to be there to prevent them from committing a crime. And if we can't get this done, now my godfather actually has a pacemaker. That noise decibel that he's talking about, my windows are rattling. I called the police once in particular that I remember and was asked "Mister, could you please turn your music down?" My response was, "It's not my music." And nothing is done now, but back then, someone came out. In the last 6 years, they play it from 8 in the morning until 1 the following morning. And I can't get any sleep. I've retired, I didn't retire to be up at a disco. That's not in my home.
What I'm going to do tonight, sir, we have representatives here from the Silver Spring Police Station representing Captain Johnson. We'll make sure that you'll have the opportunity to talk. But back to Mr. Leggett, if you could respond to the same questions.
Tacoma Park, city, or is it in the county? Could you call?
It's only 2 blocks from here. It's in the county.
It's county or the city?
Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, this is, we talked about community policing and how the police department tries to do that, but this is sort of a perfect example of where it has failed. Because community policing is more than just the police department. It's getting Department of Housing and Community Development, it's getting the other county agencies involved to solve these particular problems, identifying this as a problem house. I mean, I've seen I won't say so many times, but several times where one bad house on a block can ruin several blocks around it. And that's why you've got to take community policing and expand it with the other county departments and make sure that we're all working together to go after these bad apples and clean up a neighborhood for you. And we've done it many times before. That's the kind of approach we need to do here.
You have the right to peaceful enjoyment of your property, and so does everyone else in the county. And so it is important for the county to provide adequate enforcement, including enforcement of codes in terms of whether there's a noise violation or whether there's a violation of how people keep their trash or whether it's parking. And so this is an area that I've heard a lot about as I've gone around the county. We've knocked on 18,000 doors in the past 14 months. And the issue of making sure neighborhoods remain vibrant and also that people follow the rules in terms of what noise is or what parking is. That kind of thing is important to people staying in Montgomery County. So you have the right to the peaceful enjoyment of your property, and the county needs to make sure that we do our part to make that happen.
But of course, the police tell me that they have no decibel laws.
There are decibel laws.
We're going to make sure that we speak to our police departments here tonight. Yes, sir, I think you're next.
Let's give Mr. Leggett a chance.
Okay, I want you to respond to you, and you didn't take all your
Yeah,
time.
the reason I was asking whether or not it was the city or the county, so that we can make certain that the police, Department of Housing have an opportunity to look at it, because if it is a county problem, we have rules and regulations that should govern that. And all we have to do is come out and make certain that we are following through on your request.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Greg. Sometimes there's a perception among my neighbors that the county resources devoted to down county are less than the county resources devoted to up county. Is there an imbalance between up county and down county? And so, what should be done about it?
Well, I would say it's probably true that people in the Up County feel the same way. And so the challenge is making sure that we have enough resources to go around. One of the gaps and one of the shortages in our budget over the years, I believe, has been maintaining our infrastructure. And that's true in many parts of the county, whether it's crumbling sidewalks or roads that need repair or stumps that aren't removed. It's a variety of things. So while I understand how people can feel that way here in Silver Spring, I can tell you that people in other parts of the county feel that way as well. And the job of us as elected officials is to make sure we provide the appropriate balance throughout the entire county.
That was a concern I heard a lot about when I was county executive. So what we did was we remapped all of the police beats throughout the county to make sure that there was an equalization of calls for service. And then we wanted to make sure that as we carried forward, that we'd keep analyzing and making sure that you don't have twice the calls for service in one beat and then half in another beat. We want to make sure that you've divided your police force to respond to these calls for service in an equal way. And what happens is In the more dense areas, the beats are much smaller. And in the up county, they're much bigger because the calls are different. And then you factor in response time, you factor in community policing time, things like that. But I think that is what we need to do, is make sure that we equalize the demand for police services in the beats throughout the county so that everyone in the county is getting the same amount of police coverage.
If it's related to police, it is determined based on population, the challenges that the police management see within the overall community. And as a result of that, they're going to part accordingly. If you're looking at other things, it really goes by population and need. For example, bus services, library, recreation, all of those things are dependent upon the need within a very portion of the community. But you will get some disparities here or there, but overall, there's an attempt to make certain that we are responsive and we are responsive to the community as best as possible, trying to make sure that people in fact have the services that they need within the geographical location they're in within the county.
You know, since I announced this office in January, I've been campaigning a lot in Silver Spring, which is not a Republican bastion of voters. And let me tell you, I'm really impressed with Silver Spring. I don't spend much, I'm an up-county guy. And the more I see about Silver Spring, it's jumping. Restaurants, the nightlife, I am very impressed with Silver Spring. So that's a plus. And I really mean that. I've been telling people that. Silver Spring is a jewel. In terms of police presence, if there's no crime in Poolsville, that cop should be in Silver Spring if some kid's breaking into cars. You gotta have fluidity. And that's the key. You've got, in today's world of technology, if kids are breaking into cars and shooting BBs through windows on Wayne, and nothing's happening in Poolsville, then the cops in Poolsville should be in Silver Spring. It's fluid. And if there's a problem in Silver Spring, the government has to react and deal with it.
Yes, sir.
Many of our members are from Silver Spring and Coleman Park. Given the fact that many county residents experience a mental illness each year and end up in our prison and court system, I would like to know why the Computer and Learning and Resource Center will be eliminated after 25 years, particularly since it's been a successful program and effective. Montgomery County residents have stated that there are against mental health cuts and recent filings in the metropolitan area by individuals who have a history of mental illness. What will you do to support CLARC and not have the organization closed?
Mr. Chow.
This lady read the time when I walked in and told me about that. That's an absolute disgrace. And if I'm elected, we will refund it and it'll be back in business day one, period.
Thank you.
Mr. Lake.
Yeah, we have provided a huge increase over the last few years in areas of mental health. There are a large number of programs that are out there. What we try to do is to fund an endless list of them. There are some that we have not been able to fund as adequately as we want. And we have challenges. Most of the challenges come from the state's failure to provide its level of funding, and the county has stepped in. We cannot step in and fund all of them. We've done probably the best we can, even though we've increased substantially the amount of money that we have for mental health services, behavioral health services throughout the county. But the state of Maryland has fallen in its responsibility, and the county simply cannot pick up every program at the level of funding, both what the state wants as well as what Montgomery County traditionally provides.
Mental health is very personal to me. I'm sure many of you know I had to withdraw from the governor's race because I was diagnosed with major depression and really had to take some time to get my health back for myself, for my family. When we talk about some of the incidents that Jim Chalik mentioned of people attacking schools, there's a lot of mental health issues involved with that. So we need to make sure that we are doing proper mental health and substance abuse screening for people coming into our criminal justice system. We need to make sure that we're doing that and looking out for that in our schools as well. And if we've got a program that's been working for quite some time, we should help it continue to work and help continue to find employment for people suffering from mental illness and help them get back to as normal a life as they can. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been 25 years.
We need a continuing of programs for different populations. And I've had a chance to visit the Computer Learning and Resource Center, which is a different type of program than many. It's not a program that people sign up for classes for ahead of time and have a set schedule. It's a drop-in program. And the drop-in programs seem to be out of favor with the state for whatever reason, but they serve an important need. And so I do agree that we have to have a variety of programs, not just ones that people can sign up for 15 weeks and be somewhere, for an hour or two at an exact time, but we've got to have a little more flexibility than that. And that I saw when I visited the program, and I think it does serve an important purpose and serves people well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, I think you were next.
Yes, I live in one of those little neighborhoods that were built after the war. The streets are narrow, and there have been 2 families move in with 11 cars between them. Now, those streets were not built for that, and I'm wondering, as a homeowner, what are my options? There's no parking in front of my house, it's all my neighbors.
Yeah, I used to be president of my homeowners association. It was a townhouse community, and parking was one of the perennial issues. And it's not just an issue in townhouse communities, it's an issue in single-family neighborhoods now as well, as there are more people having cars and so on. It's not an easy issue, but if the reason that there are more cars than there should be in a neighborhood is because of some kind of code violation, then that is one approach. But we also are working to give people alternatives to relying on cars as much as they do. And especially in the down county, I'm seeing, as I knock on doors and walk around, a significant increase in the number of people that are walking or biking, whether it's recreational or for commuting. And so providing a wide variety of ways for people to get around and commute is an important part of addressing that as well. But we also need to have enforcement where someone is not adhering to the rules.
But they're just citizens, and those houses have 6 cars and 5 cars, so,
It's not an easy issue.
it's not against the law, they're not doing anything, but it just impacts the whole neighborhood.
Mr. Duncan, if you would respond.
Yeah, I grew up in a Twin Brook neighborhood in Rockville, post-World War II. I'm one of 13 kids in my family. We had 1 car. We didn't have 11 cars. And we biked and walked a lot of places. But things have changed. But there are laws against numbers of unrelated people living in the same building. There are some, I think this is a code enforcement issue that not perhaps the police, but the Department of Housing and Community Development can take a look at and find ways to work with that. Again, getting back to your comments about a problem house. Getting back to the problem house that can create problems for everybody. So I think that's something that should be taken a look at and tried to fix. Thank you.
I assume you're saying they were related, or you thought they were not related, I'm not sure.
No, I'm saying they're just families living with all these cars.
If it's family with just simply a large number of cars, then that is a real challenge. But if in fact they're not related, there is in fact a code violation. We put together a task force a couple of years ago that addressed a real concern in Montgomery County, where you've taken a single family home and you turn it basically into a small hotel. There's a large number of cars out there paving over the streets in front, paving the grass over, and we have provided a code now that has in fact made most of that, if not all of that, illegal. Trash cans outside, all of that now is subject to a code violation. But if it's related to a situation where all the people are related, and they are simply living in a house that's accommodating all the people, then that's a challenge for us. We may have to go back and look at the regulation again. But right now, a large part of what we see for unrelated, large number of families, large number of cars, paving on the sidewalk, trash cans outside is against the code, and we are enforcing it.
I was on the Montgomery Village Board for about 3 years, so let me give you some advice. You should drive everybody crazy. Call your councilman, your county executive, call the police, get some neighbors to do it. The people that complain, what is it, the squeaky wheel?
Yeah.
They'll come looking for the cars. Drive them crazy. Call everybody, get neighbors to call, get involved. The people that do that, they get reaction. I'm telling you, drive them crazy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, we're going to you, and this gentleman, and to this lady next.
Thank you. Everyone's perception is his or her reality. I don't know how many of you read the report that recently came, where they indicated that kids in first grade begin to see differential punishment. And I believe that the first and foremost is to prevent things that lead to a situation where you begin to look for police. That is by eradicating the perception that one is treated differently. Because that's really number one. If it's dealt with, then you don't have to run around looking for police to do one thing or the other. Because you have well-trained, very competent person or persons. Then the second level is you have number of infrastructures from all layers. As chief executive, what mechanism would you have in place to eradicate unfair treatment, whether it's perceived or reality? Not just at your level, but at the levels where you have different managers, some of whom are like not reflecting your ideas, but they will be doing their thing that will stain your view in terms of fairness and equal treatment.
Shalik?
Yeah, in terms of police involvement, getting the police involved should always be the last alternative in a dispute or an issue in the community. Families come first, teachers, resolution is always important. It starts with the family, at school, with the teachers, community involvement. The police are the last people to get involved, but if you have to, you have to. But I agree with what you said.
The investments that we've made and we continue to make are designed to preclude the challenge that the community normally would have with law enforcement. Because at that point in time, it is a very difficult uphill battle. Most of what we've tried to do, whether that is positive youth initiative, providing support for homes and support for families, all designed to reassure the families, to help make them much more stable so that they would not get involved with the police department at all. It is a difficult challenge once that has occurred. Look at the investments that we've made. The investment that we've made is designed to preclude the challenge from starting. Because I agree with you that at a very early age, you will see difficulties and challenges across the board. If you look, for example, at the age between 18 and 35, for African American males, 1/3 to 1/4 of those are either in jail, on the way to jail, on the way from jail. We have to stop that. It starts much earlier and start supporting the families that are very elected.
Yeah, it does start much earlier, and it starts through prevention activities, which is obviously the best way to approach things, whether it's at health, whether it's community issues or whatever, of let's stop things from happening before it gets too late. So I think a lot of the things that our schools are doing, there was a study that I just read about recently, which really said that the Montgomery County public schools are, I don't want to say fortunate, but what's happening in our public schools is because we're so diverse, that incidents of discrimination and sort of learning discrimination as you get older are much less likely to happen here in Montgomery County because kids are interacting with kids from all kinds of different nationalities, different religions, different whatever. And I think that's a real plus for us, and I think that will help solve some of the problems from happening later on.
I want Montgomery County to be an opportunity county. That's one where there's access and opportunity for all, and preferably you're going to have that access and opportunity available at the very beginning of life, because that's where you can make the most difference in having success for everyone. We are taking steps to increase opportunity for people that are vulnerable. In 2012, I wrote and the county passed a charter amendment that provides the county the ability to provide opportunity for people with disabilities for employment, which is a group that's had much higher employment than most. We need to expand our library hours. Let's take them up. Propose taking them up 8 hours a week at our libraries, opening them on Sundays, so that we use that great building that we have, and that it's open more to people. So opportunity is what will provide more ability to stave off the need for police and for jail.
Yes, sir.
My family, we're new residents in the White Oak community, and we love that community and the East County area. And we're excited about some of the development that is on the drawing boards for that part of our county. I'm curious to know about your position or what you think about the link, since we're talking about public safety, and thank you, Mr. Hausner, for setting the forum, the link between public safety and economic opportunity. And what, do you see any innovative ways to kind of reshape our economy and the way our economy happens so that more people are able to participate, not just jobs and job training, but other innovative ways that people can own, earn money, and invest so that our communities are better?
Well, I think that one of the things that we can do, and this is something that we need to work on with the state, and we are, is to make sure that we're not giving people criminal records for no good reason, whether it's for small amounts of marijuana possession or other things that then make it very hard for people to get a job and be successful. So that's something that is a direct link between a law and the ability of people to support themselves by getting a job. Our Department of Correction and Rehabilitation does a great job in trying to make sure that people only go through there once. We don't want people to come back, and we do provide as many skills as we possibly can to inmates at the jail in Clarksburg, so that when they re-enter, as everyone does, the community, that they're going to have the best chance to be successful and support themselves. Drug courts, another great example of that. Terrific, amazing program that the courts and counties work.
Yeah, economic growth and public safety do go hand in hand. I mean, just look at downtown Silver Spring. I worked there for a number of years with AT&T. It was not a safe place. It was not a pretty place. It was a mess. And because I worked there and would take walks every day, that's one of the reasons I said when I first ran for county executive that I'm going to fix downtown Silver Spring and I'm going to die trying. And we did. But what happened was, by bringing economic growth there, by bringing people there, it made it a much safer place. And it made it a place that people wanted to go to because they felt much safer. So I think that's the kind of economic growth. We need to make Wheaton and the next sort of major economic redevelopment area for the county to help that community. But that's the kind of growth that really does improve public safety and makes a big difference in people's lives. And we've got young, old, kids, you name it, coming to downtown Silver Spring now, whereas 15 years ago they wouldn't have considered that at all. So that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
We will have economic growth. The question is not whether or not the county will have economic growth. It's a question of whether or not that economic growth is inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that all people feel that they have an opportunity, they have a chance for success, and that the government is helping them to make that success happen. We can do a much better job of it. I've traveled literally around the world, and we've seen what other communities are doing. How you deal with microloans for people who are starting small businesses. How do we ensure that we can provide people with the access to connectivity to those who can help them? Montgomery County certainly will have economic growth and development. On paper, it will look good. But the question is, does that include all of the people in Montgomery County? All of the people in this very diverse community, whereby they can feel a part of the economic growth that has happened. That's the objective here. We will grow. We will prosper. We must make sure that everybody feels that they're part of it.
One of my priorities is business recruitment. Montgomery County has a reputation as not being business friendly. We have to recruit businesses, high-tech businesses, big salary jobs, bring these companies in with their families and increase the economy. And you do that by having a safe community. So one of the elements to attract business, aside tax incentives, maybe infrastructure incentives for them, is having safe streets, great schools. So that combination will attract CEOs to put their families and their companies here. We are getting clocked by Virginia. More cranes in Virginia than in Montgomery County. We've got to bring business here. And you're not going to bring business here if a CEO thinks his kid's going to get mugged. So public safety, business recruitment go hand in hand. And we've got to be business friendly to attract these jobs.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I would like to know what each of you would do to resolve any issues with the Silver Spring Transit Center.
Thank you very much.
That
was my question. Thank you.
I'm not sure of the connection to criminal justice, but Tony, I'll defer to you. That's a question came from the floor. I'm going to put you on the spot. We're going to let that question be entertained by our gentleman here.
Now, I'm not just saying this tonight. I've called for this for 6 months. The only way to get answers as to what happened is to have the federal government set up a federal criminal grand jury investigation. Have the U.S. attorney issue subpoenas, get all the business records, put people before the grand jury, and get answers. This is a one-party town. The Democrats are not going to answer your questions. There's no Republicans in this government, so there's no friction. There's nobody standing up banging for answers. Nobody's going to answer that question in this county, the way the political climate is. We need a federal grand jury, bring in subpoenas, bring people, documents, and get answers. Maybe there was no criminality, but we deserve answers why it's tens of millions of dollars overspent, years overdue, and the buses can't even ride on the concrete. Were there kickbacks? Was bad product purchased that we didn't pay for? We have to get these answers, and we're not going to get it without a federal grand jury.
Well, first of all, we don't need all of that to deal with a contractual problem. It is a contractual problem. It will be resolved. It will be resolved very simple. I'm not going to move to have it open until I feel that it is completely safe to do so. Secondly, the time frame for doing so is later this summer or the early fall. Thirdly, Montgomery County is not going to pay for anything additional beyond what we have. And we are looking very clearly at making sure that we move forward. The only reason we have not proceeded thus far is because of the weather. It's an outside facility, and you have to wait until the weather's there so you can move forward. Once that is done, we will be moving forward. If there are any issues associated with that, those issues will be resolved in terms of the normal legal process.
Yeah, as the next county executive, I'm going to fix and open the Silver Spring Transit Center. It needs decisive leadership to get this done. They stopped everything. They hired a consultant in June of 2012, to tell him what was wrong with it. In March of 2013, he came back and said, here's the things that are wrong with it, here's what you need to fix. And we're still sort of meeting and debating and talking about this as opposed to getting it done. It's outrageous. It is a real blight on downtown Silver Spring. It's about a 15-minute walk from the Kiss and Ride to the metro station. It's been, 5+ years that people have had to make that walk, and we need to get it fixed and open, and I pledge to you that I will do that. Thank you.
Well, it's really the Silver Spring Non-Transit Center, because until it's open, it's not a transit center. Both the gentlemen to my left had a chance to get it done and build it. They both had groundbreakings. It has been 3.5 years since the first groundbreaking in 2005. It's been 5.5 since the second one. It is an embarrassment to the county. It is a fiasco. So we need to do 3 things. One, we need to get it open as feasibly and quickly as possible. We need to protect the taxpayers in terms of what their exposure is to the cost. And we need to make sure we learn the lessons from this so that it never happens again with any of our other construction projects. That's what I pledge to do.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I want to know what the candidate will do about the smell of illegal substance use like cocaine, marijuana, or the like, which in my very humble opinion as a county resident, as a safety manager in the downtown community, I think that it's actually a serious problem. People do their things behind closed doors, and when you call the police, they hardly would do anything satisfactory because they will ask you whether you have an arrest warrant. You can't have that in that kind of time-sensitive situation.
And most of the time, all they will tell you is if you feel it again, if somebody complains again, you call us. And when we call, they can't go in, even though we can pinpoint exactly where we think the smell is coming from. So I want to know if the candidates have any way we can go around that to be able to zero in on the perpetrators in a very time-sensitive fashion.
I heard part of the question, but I couldn't hear all of it. Mr. Clark?
I think, again, this sort of appears to be a quality of life issue. I think this gentleman is indicating from his community that he's detected odor of illicit substances. When he calls the police, maybe they have not responded the way that he would think. He's also, I believe, concerned that this could be a bigger problem as well. And what can we do in a criminal justice sense to address that issue? Is that a fair representation of your question?
Yes. Okay. Well, what I would suggest is, if you haven't had a chance to do this, not only contact people who are the officials in this case, whether it's the police department, but also contact your elected officials to bring them into this and to start asking some of the questions that you don't feel you're getting a satisfactory answer to. That is often the advice I give to people as I knock on doors and people have complaints about some aspect of the neighborhood or something that they're not getting satisfaction from. And so, write, if you haven't had a chance to, members of the county council too, because we can ask, and we will ask the questions of the departments that you may not be getting the answer in a timely way or in a complete way. Without knowing the details of your situation, it's very hard to comment on it, but that's what I would suggest in addition to what you've tried to do already.
Thank you.
The other thing that you can do is, I'm sure with the leases that people have signed, that criminal activity is not allowed in the apartment complex. So I think through the property manager, there must be ways to identify these tenants and move to get them out of the building if they are causing disruption and causing problems as well. So there's as Mr. Anders said, going through the political route. There's also the private route through the property manager, finding a way to help remove these tenants from the building. I know our Housing Opportunities Commission has a very strict no drug policy and works very hard to make sure that that's enforced. So.
Well, so long as the Maryland General Assembly is in session, I'm not sure by the time we finish, it may not need to be a crime. But assuming that it is, then you have to go through the appropriate process that you're going through and constantly complain about. But also, let's keep in mind what we've talked about here in terms of the question of public safety. There's also a problem of justice and how you balance things. Although I have not seen incidents of this in Montgomery County, but in some communities, this quote, the smell of drugs has been used as an entree for police officers and others to engage in searches in a wide variety of ways that undermine a great deal what this community is fearful of. So we have to do this in a respectful manner. That we want the law enforcement to, in fact, engage, and in Montgomery County we have a wonderful system where I don't think officers engage in that kind of activity. But you need to balance that very carefully because you don't want to infringe upon civil liberties based on odor, smell that may not be sustained. So we have to balance it in a very appropriate manner.
I sympathize very much with your situation. And again, it's a situation where a lot of people, unfortunately, don't want to get involved, like you do. I admire that. But you've got to get some of your neighbors and more people to get involved to make these complaints. A lone voice generally doesn't get a reaction. If you can get some of your neighbors and friends to stand up and be as brave as you, then you get the police and the authorities to do something. It's like this lady with the cars that are parked. You know, it's the squeaky wheel that gets reaction. You've got to get help. You can't stand alone. Often they won't listen to you. They'll think it's a grudge. But I admire you. Keep up the fight, but get some help and make the calls. Don't give up.
Thank you. And this gets back to, if you see something, say something, whether it's suspicious or not. Have the courage like you do, and some of these others here tonight, to get involved as a community member. At this time, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to give the sign from our coordinator here. Gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for taking time from your very busy schedules to be here. quality of life in Montgomery County. As you all have said, we have a very, very safe community. Again, we want to thank you for you believing in the abilities that you hold to be our next county executive. So what we'll do now is we'll give each of you 2 minutes to sort of conclude, and then we will have closing comments. So let's start alphabetically again. Mr. Andrews, and we'll go right down the line.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming, and I urge you to continue to pay close attention to this race. This is a very important race. The county executive is the person that represents the county to our neighboring jurisdictions and to the General Assembly. Needs to make sure that we are effective in Annapolis, needs to make sure that effective and sustainable and reasonable collective bargaining agreements are negotiated, because that's what drives our budget, and that's what squeezes out things if they're excessive. We have so many good things in Montgomery County, but there are things we have to do to improve it. We need to get our competitive edge back if we're going to provide the type of jobs for our people, and if we're going to keep people here after they retire. Time and time again, when I'm out knocking on doors, I hear people say, you know, I like Montgomery County, it's been a great place, but I don't know that I'm going to stay here. I don't know that I can afford to stay here, or I don't know if I can afford to, I can justify the difference in cost that it costs to stay here. I want people to stay here, and so we need policies that are friendly to our businesses in terms of the taxes. Our taxes, our energy tax is too high, and we need to reduce it. The property tax rate's been raised the last 3 years. That doesn't help keep people here. And what drives those taxes are our lack of success in Annapolis in getting money back. We only get about 20 cents back on the dollar. The shifts in burden, the teacher pension shift 2 years ago, it's going to cost us $60 million annually by 2017. We've got to be much more effective there. And we also need to make sure that we are involving all segments of our community, that we're meeting the different needs that people have. I bring experience to this position, and I bring independence from interest groups. I'm the only candidate running that does not accept campaign funds from developers and political action committees. The county executive is the person who negotiates on your behalf with those groups. Who do you think is going to get you the better deal? Someone who is independent of those groups, or someone who is funded by those groups? I think the question answers itself, and I ask for your vote in the Democratic primary on June 24th. Thank you.
Yeah, I asked for your vote as well. It's a great community. With the right leadership, we can make sure that our future is as bright as our past has been. And there's tremendous potential here in this county to do wonderful things and have the best quality of life of any community in the country. I'm very proud that I've been endorsed by our firefighters and our police officers in this campaign to be the next county executive. Very proud of that support. And I will take the rest of my time to make a public service announcement. We talked a little bit about mental health. I mentioned my suffering from major depression, taking time to get better. You know, in the week after I announced that I was suffering from major depression, was pulling out of the governor's race, 1,000 people called the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County looking for treatment. And I've spent a lot of time talking to mental health groups and others in the past 8 years, and I really have this sense of obligation to please encourage you, if you are suffering, it is hell. I described it as my 2 years living in hell. If you're suffering from this, if you know people are suffering from this, please seek treatment. Please get them to get treatment. You don't have to live this way. You don't have to be miserable. You can improve. Treatment works. I'm living proof of that, and that's the message I want to leave with you. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.
We talked about balance this evening. We talked about priorities. And we talked about the future of Montgomery County. But before we talk about the future, let's look at what has happened. I've had the very difficult leadership responsibility of leading in the worst economic times in the history of our county. And in doing so, we have produced enormous results. We talked about housing. We provided 9,000 affordable housing units. We talked about public safety. We've reduced crime in Montgomery County 3 times more than the national average. We talked about the challenges we face in our school system. Look at the investments that we've made. Across the board, whether you're talking about the Positive Youth Initiative, or you're talking about the influx of jobs in Montgomery County, measure that in a time of great economic uncertainty. And we've come through all of this right now, with Montgomery County having the highest financial reserves in the history of our county. That is an amazing record of achievement under some very difficult circumstances and conditions. Measure that. Think about it. I did not have the luxury of leading in the good times. Those good times are gone. We are going to have better times. We're going to have it because we've laid the foundation and we've started to grow from that. It has been a very difficult task, but we've led it by trustful leadership that balance all of those things we've talked about today. I ask for your vote. The streets in Montgomery County are safer today, but they can be even safer tomorrow. If I can make it as your county executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. As a Republican, I'm outnumbered 3-1. No matter who I run against, they're all excellent guys, good guys. But whoever I run against, 3-1 out of the gates. So please consider me for my ideas. I think I have ideas for the future, a vision for the future that we haven't heard in the Democratic administrations of the last 20 years. I want to have a police officer at every school. I want to do away with the trailers. 10,500 of our kids are in trailers. That's a disgrace. Why don't we have a 4-year world-class university in this county with dormitories and athletic facilities? I want to think big. I want to do away with the bag tax, which everybody hates. Also, I think it's time to privatize the liquor industry. We are the only county, repeat, only county in the United States, repeat, in the United States, that owns and controls the liquor stores, the warehouses, and the distribution of liquor. What's that? I'm morally opposed to it. I think if we sell off these assets, we can make a ton of money. I want to bring professional sports. There's groups that want to bring arena football into the county. There's a minor league baseball group that wants to talk about coming into the county. Let's grow. Let's even build a place where you can see your kids graduate high school. You can't even see your kid graduate high school in Montgomery County. You got to schlep down to the DAR hall in Washington, 2 hours to get there, $60 ticket, and miss the graduation. You know what I'm saying? So, look, I've got an uphill battle, but I can't win without Democrats and independents. I think I have the ideas to move us forward, to create a different level in our county. And I really appreciate you inviting me, and I really appreciate you considering my candidacy.
First of all, I want to thank Ed Clark for candidates for having an outstanding discussion. We've had a very good review of a lot of different issues. I want to thank the press. There's a couple of reporters here, Post, Gazette. So hopefully you'll read about some of this tomorrow or in the coming days. I want to thank the audience both in terms of your questions and particularly your interest in criminal justice issues. So thank you everybody for coming.
Most importantly, walk home safe tonight and exercise your vote.
Good to see you.
And go watch these
Nice to see you.
Sweet 16.